You're listening to Big Blend Radio's English Connection Show with Glynn Burrows, owner of Norfolk Tours. Welcome, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about Wales, daffodils, castles, historic houses, and a little bit of the ocean and road tripping in England to Wales. And of course, you know, this is the English Connection here on Big Blend Radio with Glynn Burrows of Norfolk Tours. You can go to norfolk-tours.co.uk. And first thing first, I know we changed subjects for the show today because it started to feel like spring here, Glynn,
Oh, yeah.
and apparently it's spring in England, right?
It is. I mean, this picture behind me was taken on Monday this week. When we were driving back from Wales, we were going through Lincolnshire and we just stopped and took this picture because we knew we were going to be talking about daffodils.
Mm.
You can see what a beautiful day it was. It was beautiful with blue skies and yellow daffodils everywhere.
Man, I know we have daffodils out here too.
Right.
Beautiful. You know, they do have a feeling of hope, but I didn't know when we were having our little discussion before, the show, what we were going to talk about. And I
Mm.
was like, yeah, it feels springy. We got daffodils. And you're like, oh, there's daffodils everywhere. I'm like, well, your show airs on National Daffodil Day here, which is a day and I think it must be international because you
It
guys
is.
do the same thing, celebrate
Yeah.
Daffodil
Yeah.
Day. Mm.
We do. Yeah, I mean, as I was saying before we started, we have people in supermarkets collecting for charity, all dressed up as daffodils. So that's all a bit of fun, but it's all for a very good cause. Because I don't think anybody has not been affected by cancer, and daffodils are a sign for the cancer charities all over the world. So
To
it's
raise
something
funds
that
and awareness and
it's very
research.
close to everybody's heart.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's what we did in South Africa. Nancy toured the country for about 2 years or so with her artwork, raising funds for the National Cancer Association. And,
Yep.
we went to all these different meetings and hospitals. And that's when, like, it was eye-opening to me because I was about 13, 14 years old when I was on the road with her and going to a children's hospital, cancer
Mhm.
hospital, and not really, it was a shock to see little kids without hair,
Oh yeah.
and having to understand why. And but it was good to be there and just to make them laugh and have some fun,
Oh,
and
yeah.
once you get over your shock, because it was a shock at the beginning, you
Well,
know
exactly. And the thing is with cancer is it doesn't respect anybody or anything. It can hit
yeah,
anybody at any time and it just doesn't care. You know,
yeah. Mm.
we all have to be very aware of it and to realize that it can be us tomorrow. We don't know.
Mm.
We hope not, but
Yeah, no, we just lost a very good person in the world of music, William James, Billy, Joey, the musician,
yeah,
and
yeah, I know Bill.
Johnny. Yeah, he represented them, and a lot of the music we booked came from him. And he wasn't feeling well during the hurricanes. He got flooded during the hurricanes, and was starting treatments. And he was like, "I'm going to be slowing down doing treatments." And then I woke up one morning going, it's been really quiet. I know he's doing his treatments, and he was gone that day.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
you don't wait. But I thought about you with this because I don't know, I'll get teary. He I went to go back and think I was going to make a playlist of all the musicians we've interviewed, and then it went back almost, I'd say, about 10 years we've worked with him.
Hmm.
And by the time I started looking through, I was like, you can't say this person, that person, this. It's about over 500 people, and
Hmm.
how he connected me with other people in the industry, and how it's how one person can affect so many people is pretty
Yeah.
amazing.
Oh, it
And
is.
you just like it's crushing for so many people, especially his family, obviously his wife and family, but it is crushing. So I love that they use the daffodil, because it's cheerful, and when you're sad about it, it's like, okay, look at the daffodil. It's a cute little
And
flower cup.
daffodils are, like you say, they are everywhere.
Hmm.
So it is something that pops up and it just makes such a difference. It
You
puts a
cheer,
smile on your face. It
especially
just,
after winter. Winter's, gloomy, and you've got to have fun with winter too. You've got to get yourself out there, but daffodils can bloom in the snow, even when
yeah,
it's cold.
yeah,
They're like, I'm still in here. I'm hanging in there. I'm
yeah.
hanging in there, so there's such a beautiful strength through them. But I did not know, and you were put this in your article, and everyone, Glynn's articles in the episode notes. Let's get to the happy side of things. We're going to talk about daffodils, yes, but Wales, that's actually their national flower after all of
It
this.
is. It is. And that is what is such a woo woo moment when you
Ooh, coinky
contacted me and
dinky.
said about that, because Diane and I were actually in Wales last weekend. We were actually on the island of Anglesey, and the daffodil is the national flower of Wales.
Mm.
And it was quite spooky when you said that we were going to be talking about daffodils. And there we go. You just never know what's going to turn up. And
That's it. Well,
and
hopefully more daffodils. But so this is the national flower, but you also put in the article about the Princess of Wales
mm,
when she married Prince William, her
yeah,
wedding dress. Tell everybody about the flowers because
yeah,
this. So is the rose? Yeah, say what she has on the dress, flower
yeah.
wise.
I mean, when she got married to Prince William, she had a flower for each of the English countries. So she had the shamrock, which is for Northern Ireland. She had the thistle, which is for Scotland. She had the daffodil for Wales, and she had the rose for England.
So that's
Um,
your national flower,
yeah, the rose is our
same
national.
as America.
I don't know. I
Yeah, it
don't.
is.
Yeah, you're right. Well, we have the rose, and the daffodil is the Welsh. And the
Hmm.
interesting thing is the daffodil is the flower, and the leek is what we all associate with Wales. And the French, I was going to say, the Welsh word for leek, the Welsh word for daffodil, translate to Peter's leek. So that's quite strange. But who knows these
It's
things
not the
until
same
you
as
look.
you never go around saying Peter took a leak. He
No,
didn't.
we don't say that sort of thing.
I had
But
to. I couldn't
but
I couldn't resist that.
but you never know what you're going to find until you actually look at these things. I didn't realize that the Welsh word for daffodil means Peter's leek. You know, who would have thought? But then
And
The Welsh language is something really
no,
to be completely in awe of, because it is just nothing like anything else. You
I
know,
have
it
no clue. Everything looks backwards, like on the photos you have at some of the places you went. Like
yeah,
it looks like shop, flower shop, and then it looks like their word for shop and then flower, or like shop farm or farm flowers or something, that it gets completely in reverse. But there's no way I can't. It's so it's kind of like Gaelic, but it's not Gaelic, right?
no, just a completely different language. It's Welsh. And the funny thing is that even though you can see the words, you can't actually pronounce them, because they're not
No.
pronounced like you would expect them to be. Because double L, you would expect to pronounce as L, but actually it's yeah,
Wow.
it's sort of like a
Yeah.
CH
Yeah, because it could be
sound.
la or it could be yeah if you're like Mexico or Spain, right?
Yeah,
Double L could be like a Y.
and it's more
Um,
like a CH in Welsh.
wow,
So
wow.
it's
Oh, I gotta go where this is crazy. This is okay. So in this country, we love our road trips, right? And you did this. This was a road trip from,
it was.
Norfolk through Lincolnshire to Wales. You went to Angles. You say where you went.
Anglesey, Anglesey.
Anglesey. I can do that. Anglesey. But and we want to talk about the places you went, but I still can't say it. But you went, this would be like an iconic roadside attraction that I know all Americans are going to want to pull over to see
Oh,
this.
yeah.
We do the things like the biggest, pistachio nut. I think I tried to send you that once. We're in New Mexico, the biggest pistachio. in the world, but this
Oh,
is the second longest single word place name in the world.
yeah,
No, I can
it is. And
it
there's no way could I pronounce it. You know, it begins with Lenfair Willy Goggery Gogogoff or something. But
I
the,
would be careful how you
yeah,
say
I mean it's just a it's actually the way that the Welsh language is put together is each little bit of the word means something. So they're above the name of the place is
hmm
the translation of what the word means. So
hmm
it's all about a church in a valley and you know, etc., etc. So instead of saying a church in a valley by a river and up a hill and these little tiny bits of the word mean separate things. So it is the longest, the second longest in the world, single word place name. But luckily, the locals just call it Llanfair PG. So that's easier to say rather than the Goff place. And I got a lovely picture of Diane underneath the railway stations.
Yeah. But this whole pronunciation is like a wow. But that's why we travel, and now,
Exactly.
and you want to try to pronounce it, and I just go like, no, I can't, but I will try it,
Yeah.
and just you feel free to laugh at me. But
Yeah.
when someone's trying to learn your language, that's opening doors to friendship and fun.
Of
You
course
know,
it is. And it's good for the locals because it gives them a laugh when we try and say something that, you know, is nothing like it should be. But, you know,
no.
at least it shows that you're trying. It's like when I go to France, you know, and I do speak French, but, you know, it's just that you've got to try these things.
hmm
Whenever I go abroad, I learn a little bit of the language so I can say please and thank you and, you know,
Where's
whatever.
the bathroom?
Where's the toilet? Yeah, that's what you need. I mean,
Yeah,
Edmund is Diane and I are going on holiday with Edmund, our son, his wife, and our granddaughter, and we're going to Spain. And Edmund is
nice,
actually now learning quite a lot of Spanish. So when
awesome.
we're there, he'll be able to, you know, ask for a cup of coffee or whatever, you know,
A scone. Good luck with the
and a
scone.
cheese scone.
Oh, well, good luck on that one. I don't know about the cheese scone, but I know you'll get a lot of jamon, your
Well,
ham,
we'll try and get a bit of the local food because that's what we go
tapas,
for.
tapas. You'll get
Oh yeah,
tapas. Oh, yeah, yeah. That's yum. But the thing too is, I think what's so great about Wales being so close, like someone coming to England, that they
yeah,
could add in all these other countries, right, that
yeah,
are connected to the grand, the British Isles. You can do the actual British Isles,
yeah.
but I think that we forget that Scotland, Wales, and everyone has a different language. Not everybody's English, right? And
No, that's right. I mean,
and I'm sorry, but Scottish is its own language.
well, Scottish is a very, very strong accent,
Ooh,
very strong.
yes.
And the nice thing is that actually all of these places are quite close by. I mean, we traveled from the east coast of England to the west coast of Wales in 6 hours. So
Mm.
we went across the widest part of the British
Oh,
Isles
okay.
in 6 hours.
That's
So,
awesome.
you know, you can go anywhere in England, you know, and Wales and Scotland. You know, in a week, you can actually get around England, Scotland, and Wales. You know, you
Mm.
obviously you can't spend hours and hours driving, but you know, it is doable. And
hmm
that is something that people do probably forget is how small we are as an island.
hmm
You know, we are
Yeah.
do
And you can get to Northern Ireland too?
well, you get a ferry. You can get a ferry to Ireland. Actually, we went to Holyhead, which is the ferry port on Anglesey to get you across to the Republic of Ireland.
Okay.
You can get to Northern Ireland as well. You can drive up there. So, you know, you
Mm.
can make your way around England, Scotland, Wales, and Ireland.
What about the Isle of Man?
The Isle of Man, you can get a ferry across from to
Oh,
the
wow.
island.
And the
Yeah.
Channel Islands, you have the thingy underground now, right?
Yeah, the tunnel doesn't go to the Channel Islands, it goes to
Oh,
France. But you can get a ferry across to Guernsey or Jersey.
really? Okay,
Yeah,
a
yeah.
ferry.
A
We
ferry.
flew, but
You can
I,
fly,
okay.
but
Yeah.
we're we're not far, and that is the nice thing with England is that you can pop across to France if you want to. You can pop across to Guernsey or Jersey. You can go to Ireland. You can
Mm,
you can get around because
yeah.
we're not far. You don't have
With
to
with
fly.
you going to Spain
Yeah,
because
we'll
well,
fly.
you're of course because you're being in East Anglia, right? Oh, so you're going to fly, and that's not
We're going to
far.
fly. Well, no, you'd have to go all the way through France, so that would be quite a long journey. But we fly, but that's only three hours flight
That's
from
easy.
England. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So
Wow.
getting to Europe is very simple once you're in England. So
Oh, I love that.
the nice thing is that you in America you think about distances and you are literally hours away from anywhere across the other side, like when we were in Canada, we went from Toronto across
Hmm.
to Calgary and then across to Vancouver Island. And that took nearly as long as it did for us to fly across the Atlantic. It is amazing the scale of North America.
Yeah,
So
especially when you
England,
head
that's
west.
something, yeah, that's something to think about if you are planning a trip is that if you're going to have 2 or 3 weeks, you can actually get around Europe and England and Wales and Scotland and Ireland relatively easily.
Mm. And yeah, so don't you maybe just add them in, say, okay, even if it's there for a day, So when
Yeah,
you're thinking if you're going to France, you can hop over. It's like,
yeah,
Cheryl Ogle, we I think you've been on shows
yeah,
together with her. She's a
yeah,
travel advisor. She has a love affair with London.
yeah.
She just absolutely adores it. And if she goes to Europe, somehow she adds in London.
Yeah.
She's like, I'm not going to Europe without going to London. And that's that.
Well,
She's
you can get on a train in Paris and get a train to London
wow.
because
Now that's my style.
that's what the tunnel is for. So
Oh,
you
how
can
cool.
go straight from Paris to
And
London.
and you can do a lot of this all through public transport too, if you wanted,
Yeah, oh
or
yeah,
rent a car.
we are really, really fortunate in that we still have a really good bus service and a
Mhm.
relatively good train service, so you can get about the country.
That's awesome. I love that. I love that. Okay, so a lot. This is like road trip time. It's spring. It's beautiful weather, and
Yeah.
you've got to go to that little building with this big long name and see if you can pronounce it. It's fun. Look at it, the image, and it's all part of Glynn's article. Again, it's linked in the episode notes, or just go to blendradioandtv.com, type in Daffodil in Wales, and you'll find it. Um, so we've talked about daffodils, but let's talk about this castle that you went to.
Oh yeah.
Is it Beaumaris? Oh, I'm gonna.
Beaumaris. Beaumaris.
It was kind of close. I got the bow.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, Beaumaris is a lovely town. It's right on the strait. It's there's a the strait between Anglesey and Wales. It's called the Menai Strait, and there are two bridges that go across. And Beaumaris is right on the side, so it's overlooking the sea, and it's a beautiful little town. But the castle is a real fortress. It's got,
Mm.
normally speaking, you've got in England, you've got a castle with a wall all the way around it, and then you've got the castle in the middle. But this one's got a wall all the way around it, another wall all the way around inside, and then another bit in the middle. So it's a real fortress. And it weren't even finished. The funny thing
Oh
is
wow.
that it weren't finished. And the castle itself is just amazing. It is and it's moated, so you've got a moat all the way around it. It's got its own quayside, so you could have actually sailed when it was built. You could have sailed right up to the gate of the castle
Oh, wow.
and got off your boat at a quayside. But it is just an amazing stronghold, and the picture of it that well, several pictures of it that I put in the article, it just looks like the archetypal castle with a moat.
Yeah, don't mess with me, castle.
It's definitely I'm here and you are not going to get in type of castle. you
What
know
I mean, what were so this was like what were they protecting? The king, the queen? What was going on that what was
Yeah.
happening that they had to be so
Well,
protective?
the king at the time, and obviously with England and Wales, we were always fighting over borders, and we were
Mm,
the English, if they took over a bit of Wales, would put a castle in and basically tell the locals that we're here, and that's basically what it's all about. Most castles are basically a statement
hmm
rather than, although they're obviously a fort and they're obviously a protection, but most of them are a statement that,
mm,
we are here and we are in charge. It's
mm.
it's it's really to tell the locals that, don't mess with me. But when you consider that, this was built in the 1300s, it's pretty amazing, you
The
know.
1300s, that's like really going back. And when they made these things, I mean, you're talking, we just did a show on castle hunting around the world with a couple, Joel and Ryan. They're travel writers, and they've done 423 or 432, over 420 castles around
Yeah,
the world. And
yeah,
they're all into it. It's like a thing because, but we were talking about this whole military side of it,
yeah.
but the actual building of it, it's like this was not like our houses are built now. You know,
No, no.
this is
They
heavy
were,
duty work.
yeah. I mean, the amount of stone that goes into the walls is just unbelievable. I mean, for instance, the castle just up the road from me at Castle Acre, the walls are about 11 foot thick, and they are solid flint, you know, and they would have been probably about 100 foot high. So you are talking about a lot of stone. You're talking about tons and tons and tons. So it would have been built by the peasants. So the Normans, when they came over and built Castle Acre Castle, they would have got all the locals and
Yeah.
they would have said, "Go and pick me loads of stones and put them here." You
Think
know,
but think about that.
yeah, yeah. I
I
mean,
mean,
the
and were the
actual
horses, would they have horses to drag the stones or
no, 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 no. The peasants would have carried them. So it would have literally have been manpower.
and not with big pay?
No,
I'm
no.
just I'm just getting people into the sense of reality when you go to these. It's like it feels, there are a lot of castles. I mean, there's opulence, right? I always talk about
Yeah,
the
yeah.
opulence word, but then I want people to realize that opulence comes from somebody else's backbreaking work.
That it always comes with a price, and the price is always paid by the peasants. Everything in the world, and we don't want to get too political. Please don't start me on that. But
Don't get me started.
everything, don't start me, but I'm now going to start anyway. Everything in the world is paid for by the poor, and all you need to do is look, and it's always paid for by the poor,
Mhm.
always.
And that's the importance of history.
Yeah,
Because when you always look about a circumstance that you may be going through now, aren't we just talking we're doing good. We're being very good here. We're doing good. But if you look at what's happening in a circumstance, maybe your community could be nationally, internationally, and there's a circumstance, you've got to go to the history first. I
yeah,
talked to a lady who does things she's an expert on housing and when housing rights and equity. In other words, not equity like equal rights for housing. So when we talk about that kind of equity, it's not like how much is in your bank account.
yeah, yeah.
Um, and she said, if you do not understand the history of how something has come to be, you're not going to be able to understand how to make the changes. You always have to remember and recall the history and always put that as part of your context. If you want to make positive change or any change, you must use history. And that's why we cannot allow our history to be erased.
No, we have to learn from the past.
Mm-hmm.
And it always says history repeats itself. And it does. You
Yeah.
can see it over and over and over again where the same thing happens. And,
Mm,
like I say, everything turns out to be paid for in whatever way by the poor, whether it's paid
hmm.
for by, by their taxes, whether it's paid for by their lives,
Oh,
because
that's a good point.
the castles would have been a graveyard to lots of peasants. There would have been loads of people who died in the construction of those castles. And, it's them sort of things that we have to remember. They may be
Mm,
nice places to visit today, but just think about how they got to be where they are and who constructed them. Yes, they were designed by, the knights and the rich people and the king and his people, his entourage, but they were actually constructed by poor people who
mm.
were
Well,
who were carrying stones around on their backs, basically.
well, it's the same like in this country, the White House, which is actually part of our National Park Service,
Right.
was built by slaves.
There you go.
So it's, that I mean, slavery was that's a whole other conversation. But yeah, so I mean, when you go to these castles, it's so important to look at that. But I also want to talk about, okay, this building that you went to is like a historic mansion, right?
Oh, yes. Beautiful.
You get to say the name,
It's I've got to find it in my writing.
but
Plus new something. I've got you'll have to
it's
remind me.
PLAS plus Newid
Yeah, Plus Newid. That's the one.
Newid.
And
Okay,
it is a magnificent house, and that again overlooks the Menai Straits. So you've
beautiful.
got a fantastic view. And again, the grounds are to die for. There's great big sweeping lawns that sweep right down to the water side, really, where the
Mhm.
boats used to tie up. And then you've got these fantastic gardens and these
Mm,
lovely woodlands. So
mm,
apart from the house, which is fascinating, and the story of the family is fascinating because you don't realize until you do the historical research and you listen to what the guides are
mhm.
talking to you about, um, that a lot of these big houses went through stages of being up and then being down again. I mean, this particular one, Plas Newydd, the owners were bankrupted a couple of times. They had all this money, but there's always one member of the family who squanders it, either wine, women, or song, or gambling, or whatever. And that happened there. It turned out that they got bankrupted, and someone else came along, and then someone else in the family went to war, and it's all fascinating. But
Yeah, I mean, it's gossip.
the most fascinating thing is that there is actually a wooden leg in one of
Dude,
the.
this is amazing.
It is fantastic. This bloke who owned the house, he was at the Battle of Waterloo, which anyone who remembers, Battle of Waterloo was 1815, um,
Hmm.
and he lost a leg. But in those days, obviously, you actually had a real wooden leg. It was a wooden leg, and his one of his wooden legs is in a cabinet with all these other bits and pieces. But the
Cabinet of Curiosities.
Yeah, but the interesting thing is he had one leg um for riding his horse, and that had it moved at the knee, but it didn't move at the ankle.
Mm,
Then he had another leg that he, every day, his everyday leg, which obviously he could walk with, so it needed to move at the ankle as well as the knee. And then he had another leg, which was his dancing leg, because it needed to be a little bit more supple than his normal walking leg. So, he had
that's amazing.
three spare legs, which
But
is
isn't that just show where we were and now we were progressing with things?
yes.
I mean,
And like
that's
Diane was
amazing.
telling me that in England, I don't know whether you have it, you have dancing with the stars or something. You probably have it in America.
Yeah, yeah, we do.
Yeah, and the people we had one man on there who had a prosthetic limb, but what they have now is they use a blade for dancing, So it's a sort of like a saber shaped
Oh, I've
metal
seen them.
blade.
That's what a lot of athletes use.
Exactly, yeah.
Yes.
Because they can get about
Bend.
easier than they can on a metal or a
Yeah,
wooden.
it springs. It's like bent.
Yeah,
It
you,
looks like what we call a panga. A panga is kind of a blade, like you're saying, that we used to use in Kenya. It's a long blade, but it curves down at the bottom, so you cut the grass with like that, long
right.
and tall. Hmm.
And that's what they use now. If they're going to do any sport or dancing or anything like that, they use a blade rather than a leg. So he needed a dancing leg, which is I find that
We,
absolutely brilliant.
you know the Dropkick Murphys band, right? They have the song "I'm shipping off to Boston to
Right.
find my wooden leg." It's a Celtic group. And
Okay.
so that's as soon as I was reading your article, I'm like, Lisa, don't go there in your brain. But I did. It's just
Yeah,
like I'm
yeah.
shipping off to Boston. There I'll send you that. I'll send you that because now it's that song is playing in my head the whole
Right.
time. But
An earworm.
wow, wow. What I mean, that's the thing when you go to these houses. The other thing I found interesting about this house is that it has the Rex Whistler dining room. And I'm
Yes.
wondering about Whistler because the connection to Canada with Whistler's Peak, and then thinking, there's Whistler, the artist.
Yes. This
So
this
now my
this
brain
one
went, ooh,
this one is he was around in the 20s. So when they told me that Whistler was the artist, I automatically thought of Whistler's mother. But
mm,
obviously that
that's
was
right.
centuries. That was centuries before. This one was in the 1920s. So it is literally the entire side of the room. This whole wall, from floor to ceiling and from side to side, is a complete mural of, a view. It's supposed to be an imagined view out of the window because you can see it, it is
Hmm.
the Menai Strait with imagined buildings all on the bank and everything. But the interesting thing that I like is at either end of the mural are trompe-l'œil, as they call them in France,
Hmm.
which are these sort of just like an archway, and you look down the archway and it actually looks as if it continues. And they're really good because either side of the room you can look. And if you look down the side of the room, you can actually think that that just keeps going, but
That's
it
wild,
doesn't.
huh?
Yeah, but you can see these in quite a few houses where they will have a painting on a wall and you look as if you're looking out to a garden, but you're not. You're looking at a
Mm,
painting, and that's what
I
they
love that.
call a
You know,
trompe-l'oeil.
Nancy did a lot of murals. She's done it for restaurants, hotels,
All right,
rooms. But then somebody asked her to do the swimming pool, the bottom of the swimming pool.
all
So she
right,
did a whole coral reef,
yeah,
and then they filled it up, and we all like, let's all get in. Well, it because of the water, it became 3D, and so
yeah.
everybody hit their head at the bottom because you forgot, like,
Thought it was carrying on.
because it was like you're inside a coral reef.
Oh wow,
It was super cool,
I think it
but
was.
she's like, every people were bumping their heads at the bottom because you exactly the effect you're talking about.
Yeah,
That was so cool when she did that. That was
yeah, yeah.
like that was epic.
Is it still
Man,
there?
I don't know. That was in South Africa, man, probably like a long time ago when I was a little girl. But I
Oh yeah.
loved it, man. I'm like, Mommy, you got to do more of these. These are cool, you
Does she
know.
still paint?
Yeah, she's actually Nancy's getting back into some of her artwork because
Good.
you can't leave your art. Even what we do is still got that art creative side for both of us.
Yeah.
Like I'll never not do my music, and she's the same way in regards to her art. But right now, because of our travels, she is learning to do her art on the computer, and it's a whole different. It's not AI. It is using it like your
Yeah,
paintbrushes,
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
and stuff like that. So she's been doing that, and because she wants to do everyone's, as we travel the country and see all the animals, she's like, I want to paint their portraits. It's driving her bonkers, so she has to do it. But we'll get there. I'm like, right now, we're still working.
Oh, keep
you
working.
know, I know it's all connected. It's all connected. But yeah, I love this trip that you took. And I love the stories that can come out of just a visit to a historic mansion can lead to so many stories because someone lived in there,
Yeah,
you know?
it's all about real life, isn't
And
it?
your walls did talk in a way, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So,
exactly. I mean, it is about learning about where you are, and that is why I travel, and that's why you travel, because
mhm.
you want to find out about the places you're in. And learning about silly little things like, Peter's leek is the name of a daffodil in Welsh. Them sort of silly little things just make it interesting.
It's fun, it's interesting. But I do also think, we talk about how the world's gone to hell, all this drama, right? And there is bad stuff.
Of
Absolutely.
course there is.
Wars and death and
Yeah,
all of
yeah,
that.
yeah.
That is something we have never stopped doing as humans, right? It's a horrible part of us. However, when you think about the days of that kind of, and of course, some things are still going on in the world. Child labor is still an issue. Human trafficking is still an
Oh,
issue.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So all that's still going. So I'm not being, naive on that. But in the general scheme of things, when we talk about poor versus rich, there was no middle ground back in the day when you talk about those castles. And so when these castles were being built, you've got to
Hmm.
think, I mean, that was really that was tough times to
Oh, it
live,
was.
to be
Yeah.
to be a peasant. I mean, and then you have to find, like, I always wonder about that, why people, how did they keep going? There's some hope, joy, belief, and those are the stories that are so fascinating to me in history. Like, a peasant may have, just kept going, and maybe a short life, but kept going. And so when you think of daffodils, maybe they had daffodils and maybe that daffodil kept them going. Does that make sense about history? When things are so
Well,
brutally bad,
yeah. I mean, we think that we've got it bad now sometimes, but actually you've got it easy. I
so
mean,
much better compared,
yeah.
as
I mean,
in
even
Western
even
societies. Let's put it that
even
way. Yeah.
recent history. We went to the prison in Beaumaris as well, and that was fascinating because in the corridors there were little bits about the prisoners who were in there. So it brings it to life. It brings real people into where they were, and one of them it was a young person. I can't think how old. They're probably a young teenager, and they were transported to Australia for 7 years for stealing a handkerchief. Now, why?
Dude, right.
Why? Why would you send
Over a
someone
handkerchief.
for a handkerchief? But that's what they
So
did.
then he ended up on the bounty. Like,
She,
she,
it was a girl. Yeah, yeah,
woo.
yeah, yeah. I mean, the prison had men and women, and children as well. And one of the interesting things was there was upstairs in the prison, there was a nursery with a little crib in it. And then downstairs, we went to one of the workrooms and there was a rope from the ceiling. And what that was for when the women were down in the workroom, they could pull the rope and rock the crib for their baby.
Oh,
So
that's smart.
yeah, but I mean that proves that even young women who had children were still in prison and working, and the only connection they had with their babies during the day, apart from obviously when they had to feed them, was just pulling on this rope to keep them keep them asleep. So
Wow.
we think we got it bad, but all you got to do is visit these places, visit a prison and see what it was like.
The
You know,
last prison we really went to and spent some time in is a Gothic jail in Louisiana,
right?
and it's haunted. Like, I could feel a hand on my head. Maybe it was me making it up in my head, but
Who knows?
there's anyway, it was built like the inside was like going up a lighthouse,
Yeah,
and it was like a twirly whirly, and then they did have a rope, and that's because they hanged two men,
yeah,
and for well, they murdered a cab driver. They stole his
right.
money for $5, right, which is probably 500 now, I don't know. and they buried this guy with the cab in they pushed it into a swamp and got caught. They put him in jail. So this jail we went in, what really got me, which I don't know why I didn't think it wouldn't be like this, was that the whole family, the jail keeper and his family, lived in the jail.
Yeah,
So
this
they
they
were
did
on the
here.
bottom floor, and their kitchen is above the inmates. There's a baby's, where the baby's little pram is and the
Yeah,
little
yeah.
bed. And I'm sitting there going, this is some crazy stuff, right? Because, and and then when you go up, they put, because the women would flaunt themselves out the windows, they put the women inside a cage within a cage.
Hmm.
So they couldn't go to the windows. So they are stuck in a cage within a cage. It, they had a toilet though, which was actually for that time pretty spiffy, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
But when you go and see how people lived in jails, and I understand it's like put them in jail, they're criminals, but if you really go and look, I think someone murdering someone for $5 is a little, that's not good, you know. But if people really looked at some of the crimes, it's like, what what are we doing,
Yeah.
and in this country, there are, in the West, gets really wild. There's one train station in the middle of the Mojave Desert, Kelso Depot, and it's interesting because this also has history of the Harvey House girls, where Mr. Harvey started all these little restaurants and hotels along, the train tracks, and it's like that's a whole other story. But here's all this hospitality. But at the depot, they had a jail cell that is outside. So when prisoners were being transported on the train and their trains were coming, they took the prisoners and put them in this jail that was attached to the depot, but they're absolutely outside in the desert, which means 120 degrees, like extreme heat,
Yeah, yeah.
or you could be snowing and icy.
Yeah, of course.
And there are snakes, bugs, scorpions, all of that. The
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
one prison in Yuma, we've talked about Yuma on the show a lot.
definitely. Yeah,
They
yeah.
have the scorpion room. Like they said that you are in the dark, you are on the dirt, and there's scorpions. And then they talk about the prison wards maybe throwing scorpions on them. And nice, isn't this a
Yeah.
wonderful chat?
Well, yeah, but it's real life.
It
And
is. I mean, nowadays you at least get clothes when you go to prison, you know.
well,
And
I mean,
and yeah, I mean, look at Manson. Look how the life Charles Manson had in jail compared to, that's insane, right?
well, this is the problem. I think we've gone from one extreme to the other, but we're not in charge. But one of the things that I saw in Wales, which I found, really fascinating, was the fact that all of these people were there, and some of them really, they really shouldn't have been there. And then
That's what I mean.
obviously,
Yeah,
obviously, some of them really needed to be there. The people who did commit murder and things, and there were a couple of men there who were hanged, and there were some there. The only place I've actually seen it, they actually had a tread wheel. So that's the one where it's actually a
oh
moving staircase where men used to have to walk all day up this moving staircase that powered they powered a water pump. Um, but it was just you know um, a punishment. But
wow,
these sort of things, which were really, a lot of it was just to put people down, to actually make them feel as if they were worthless.
nothing. Yeah,
Yeah. And
I don't know if that
it's frightening.
helps rehabilitate, and yeah, that's a whole other conversation. We'll do a prison show one day. We haven't done crime for a while. It's time.
I like crime.
I do too.
Looking back at it, it's fine.
Yeah, yeah. I don't want to commit it, but it's fascinating what people do. Remember that, the genealogy show we did, and all of a sudden, well, everybody's ancestors were jailed and murdered.
Yeah,
You had
yeah,
like your family had some.
yeah,
There
yeah,
were
yeah.
chicken thieves. There were all kinds of like shootings,
Everything.
and
Yeah,
Oh
yeah.
man, that's pretty wild, you know. And Nancy and I just drove through an area with the where the Hatfield and McCoys, and I'm like, oh, and we didn't have time to go and do all the experiences, but you got to think about some, that's a family that went, a little crazy
Yeah,
on each
and there's
other.
a lot of them. But then again, if you actually learn about them and their lives, sometimes there were really no options.
Mm.
There really weren't a lot of
See, but
options
that's
for
it. Like I
people.
just said, that's a family that went crazy. And that actually is a very wrong thing to say. So my apologies. But it's true. If you don't know the full story, how do you
Yeah,
know? Like and people do things out of desperation. You know,
exactly.
stealing like a loaf of bread, they used to chop your arm off in different
Yeah.
countries.
But you steal a loaf of bread because you're starving,
Yeah, yeah.
so you've got to do something, so
If
we
you were
we just
starving and like if you had a choice between stealing the loaf of bread or the chocolate cake, oh well, you don't care about the chocolate cake. Cheese scone.
yeah,
Okay, the
chase them.
loaf of bread or one cheese scone or a whole loaf of bread. And maybe, okay, the loaf of bread, they'll cut off your finger, but it's going to feed you longer. Or the whole hand for the scone. What are you going for?
Well, I'd have to go for the scone, I'm afraid.
I knew it.
I have to,
Off
have
with
to.
your hand, Glynn. Isn't this is a very polite show? But everyone, we want you to keep all your pendaments.
Yeah, please, please, please
Yeah,
don't do anything silly.
no. But thank you, Glynn. Always fun having you on the show, and looking forward to next time
Yeah,
and finding
indeed.
out where you're going to be twirling around. And when are you going to Spain?
We go to Spain at the end of July
Ah, nice,
for
nice,
a week. Yeah,
nice.
that'll be great.
Yeah, we want to
Enjoying
hear.
it with the family, which is what
That's
it's all
awesome.
about.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, everyone, again, the link is in the episode notes for Glenn's article, and you can also link through to his website, norfolk-tours.co.uk. Thanks so much, Glenn.
See you later. Bye.
Bye bye. Thank you for joining us for Big Blend Radio's English Connection show with Glynn Burrows, owner of Norfolk Tours. If you're planning a vacation to England or looking up your family history in England, visit norfolk-tours.co.uk to connect with Glynn. Keep up with our shows at bigblendradio.com.